I think it's important for people to realize that while we're talking about sex work and intimacy within these modern terms, this isn't new. Sex work is something that has been with our society since literally the dawn of time. We have seen sex work all around the globe, all throughout ancient civilizations, and we even see evidence of sex work in some of our very earliest forms of legislation. How sex workers are treated and treating them well is something that's specifically mentioned in the earliest written form of any sort of legal documentation that exists for humankind. I'd say that shows how important we were to society, how well patronized we were, and the fact that this is something that's very natural. There's nothing weird or dirty or problematic about sex work. It's just another type of work. It's another type of human experience that we should be able to share with each other and be fairly compensated for.
Alice is one of the most successful sex workers in the United States. Working in Nevada in a legal brothel has provided her with a very different kind of career, one where safety, financial stability, and choice are fundamental to her day to day. She also has learned a lot about intimacy because of where she works and the care that she takes in her job, which in turn lays bare a lot of the fundamentals that are often neglected in our own experience of love, sexuality, and self expression. This is a particularly interesting episode, and I hope you enjoy. This is The Other Pod. How are you?
Fantastic. How are you?
You know, it's been a rough week in the larger scheme of the world. And I
Yeah, that's a good understatement.
Yeah. And so I feel like I'm trying to figure out how to manage how bad it all feels and then also how to do something about it because the doing something about it feels more difficult than it used to.
Yeah, I head out of the country tomorrow to go and look at land options in Mexico just as a
Yep.
backup insurance policy. Just let me check out what my options are. I'm just gonna try and stay a little ahead of this.
No, that's smart. That's smart. And what are the rights of sex workers in Mexico? How does that work there?
There's really, unfortunately, nothing. So
Oh,
you figure anything would be on the independent side of the industry, or me traveling into the States for work purposes and then living and being based in Mexico otherwise.
there's no regulation? There's nothing?
Not really, unfortunately. There's really nothing of any use. Like, they're not looking to prosecute individuals. I mean, if you're not being a problem, you're probably not going to get in trouble. But
Okay.
there's also not like a formal brothel system like there is in Nevada.
Right.
It just, it's kind of like most other countries where there's no set system, but obviously it exists.
Of course, as it exists everywhere and has for all of time.
Yeah, and OnlyFans, you figure that
Oh,
exists for right now everywhere. So that's a fabulous option. Thank goodness. That's one of those things that opens up the world in some regards.
yeah. Well, I want to talk about all of these things, but I want to set the stage a little bit for people who may not be familiar with you. Do you mind if I jump in?
Please.
Okay. So you were born outside of Dublin, and then you came
Hmm.
to the US and grew up in Long Island. When we spoke briefly prior to the call, because I wanted to make sure some things were okay to discuss, you said you had a very normal childhood, which I think is important to say did not include any kind of abuse, sexual or otherwise, which tends to be unusual for sex workers, sadly. I wanted to hear a little bit about how you grew up and how that led you or did not lead you to sex work, but that ended up being your line of work.
Yeah, my family was just super duper average. Long Island is pretty upper middle class in terms of what you're looking at economically speaking. My family by no means was particularly rich or well off. It was a struggle to be able to afford that environment. But I was privileged enough to grow up in a space that really didn't have an excessive amount of violence. The streets were very safe. I didn't have any particularly traumatic things happen to me. Like the most traumatic thing was my mom wouldn't buy me the pony I wanted so very badly as a child. Like How terrible. I mean,
And so how did you find sex work through a very ordinary life?
so when I was in college, I, of course, like most college students, had roommates. And one of my roommates had a few too many leather items, a few too many whips and chains and collars and leashes and studded black leather items of various arrangements. And I would not leave her alone until she was like, okay, so I work at a dungeon. Also, my family owns a dungeon. And I'm like, great, get me a job there. School's really expensive. Please get me a job at your family's dungeon.
Like you just jumped in, no
I was like, yeah,
hesitation.
let's do this. This is great. This sounds like, are you kidding me? It's an evening job for the most part. They needed somebody to check people in and out, to set up the educational curriculum and bring in different educators. I was all in. I'm like, this is great. Please get me a job. Put in a good word for me with your sergeant of staff.
I love it. That's so interesting. So you started to work there, and then how did this expand?
I eventually, after some time, was given the opportunity to be an educator myself. And I was one of the folks that was traveling around and teaching. Even after I left New York and had moved, I was still traveling on the weekends to these different BDSM and kink events all around the world. And one of my educator colleagues shared about her experience at a Nevada brothel. I thought it was just so cool, fascinating, interesting. I decided that I wanted to apply and give it a go for myself.
Was there any worry about what the world would think, about what your parents would think, about the legitimacy of the place you would go to, your safety? Was there any concern, or you were just like, this seems legit? I am genuinely curious. Let's see.
Yeah. So this was somebody I had known for a while, had traveled with. I had heard her initially intending to go out there, and then, of course, got the follow up after her experience of staying out there for a couple of weeks. And I mean, my family did not care what I did. They were like, are you happy? Great, beautiful, wonderful. No concern really. I suppose I had already reconciled a lot of the stigma that comes with being in the adult industry because I kind of already was by way of kink and BDSM education. Like sex work's kind of an umbrella, and under the umbrella, you have a lot of different things. You have stripping, phone sex, brothel workers, escorts, BDSM professionals, educators. It's like this tremendous community of people that all get kind of the same judgment and stigma, but what they actually do day to day looks a little bit different. And most people under the umbrella tend to occupy more than one role. So they're not just a Nevada brothel worker. Like, I also create content for OnlyFans, which, of course, gives me two very, very different sides of what my day to day work looks like.
Let me touch on that very quickly. So, two questions. One is, what is the difference between OnlyFans, which to explain if someone doesn't know, is where you either create content or custom content, but it's not live, correct? Most of the time.
It can be. There is a live broadcast feature that is available through that platform. So it absolutely could be a
Okay.
live performance or something that is recorded. You have options.
But it's not in person and there's no touching versus the actual sex work, which is only or predominantly in person. Talk to me some about the way those two facets of the job are different, but also economically, is there a difference between them?
So, in the Nevada brothel industry, it's the only place in the United States that has legalized full service sex work, which means we are actually explicitly able to have sex, talk about having sex, engage in all of this. And typically, that work is going to be at the most high dollars per hour. Now, keep in mind, there is a contract between the Nevada brothel worker, myself, and the brothel I work at, the Chicken Ranch, in which there is a 50-50 split. So, however much the amount is, keep in mind that that is immediately split in half between the worker and what they are able to keep of the amount versus the brothel. So you have a 50-50 percentage for full service work with the highest dollars per hour. When you get into content creation, of course, you're looking at pre-recorded videos or custom content. And so the dollar amount per hour more often comes out to be lower, but you're only looking at 20% of that amount going to OnlyFans. So we get to see 70%, yeah, 80% of the income, and they see 20% of the income, which is their processing fees, managing the website, etc. As far as earning potential, you figure in both circumstances, there's only so many hours in a day they were able to be awake and billing. With in-person work, that's one to one. And so I might be able to make five figures in one single day with one single individual, but that's not going to be true every single day or of every single individual. Whereas in the content creation side, I can record a video, I can edit it or have it be edited. I can send it out right before I go to sleep. And then all through the night while I am sleeping, people are able to purchase this video and I'm able to earn more income from multiple individuals rather than just that one to one. So there's really advantages and disadvantages to both. There's also, and I think this part's really important for anyone who's thinking about getting into this sort of thing themselves, there's a huge difference between your top 1% earners in both the Nevada brothel industry and the OnlyFans industry versus the 99%. It is truly a top 1% on OnlyFans that earns more than $10,000 per month. That means that you are the exception. You are performing at an extraordinary level to be reaching that point where you're earning five figures or more per month, but that's just 1% of people. In the Nevada brothel world, unfortunately, in many ways, the same thing holds true. You have kind of a 1% of ladies who are going to have the potential to earn, gosh, I mean, my most successful year, I booked 1.2 million. So I earned something like $600,000 before expenses and taxes and everything else. And that's like the most successful anybody has ever been, ever, to my knowledge, at this point in time in one calendar year. So that's kind of the ceiling as far as I'm aware right now. And if somebody's done better, good for you, get your money. This isn't a competition, like, but just to kind of give you an idea. And in OnlyFans, I mean, on OnlyFans, the sky is truly the limit. There is no limit. There
Have
are
you
people
made
who make,
more on OnlyFans or you make more in the brothel, generally speaking?
so for me
Yes.
personally, I make more through the brothel work. And so the income that I earn from OnlyFans is almost a secondary income. But I am privileged in that I am in the 1% of creators. So I am earning consistent five figures through that, in addition to what I'm able to earn through brothel work, which is the exception, not the rule. Most people do not find themselves to be successful in 1% category, let alone two 1% categories. So this is very uncommon. This is not the reality for most people in my industry.
But to throw a wrench in that, how much do you think of that is true? Because they are doing illegal work in unsafe conditions with no safety net, benefits, healthcare, etc. Like if that part of the paradigm changed, how much do you think the entire possibility for that 99% would change?
So there's this fascinating reality that happens when we expand the market availability for sex work as decriminalization, which is the removal of all the criminal penalties, and then legislation or legalization in terms of how this should be ran, what are the requirements, etc. as those things roll out nationally, we'll actually see the price for sex work come down, not go up. So the because of the availability, we're going to see the dollars per hour probably come down across the board for both brothel work and the existing independent market because the risk isn't necessarily there or the stigma isn't there quite as much, which again really drives that premium on the in-person industry.
So to follow up with that, since you work in a very rare sort of climate, what difference does it make to have sex work be legal? And how does that impact your interpersonal relationships with the people with whom you work, who I think are primarily female identifying? And is if their life and your life is more stable, how does that change the day to day?
So, of course, everybody comes into Nevada brothel work from a different background. Some people have never done any sort of full service work. Some people were already working independently. Some people worked in strip clubs. So you're already approaching this with a difference in background experience. And your background experience oftentimes ends up informing your success within the brothel world. Keep in mind, of course, that it's very selective to get into a brothel. There's an interview process. You have to jump through multiple hoops, which ends up being very exclusionary, if not even a little bit racist, in that you have a predominantly white you have a bunch of very petite, thin white girls, or like the primary individuals, or girls that are particularly boobalicious, curvy, have the BBL. You kind of get one of two looks: supernatural girl next door versus hot porn star kind of body. Most brothels tend to hire ladies based off of that. Because of that exclusionary hiring practices, we don't genuinely represent the majority of sex workers in America. The Nevada brothel world is only a very, very, very small slice of that. And even then, it's a biased slice of that. By having decriminalization and expanding legalization, what we will see are more opportunities being made for those sex workers that have been excluded from the Nevada market. Most brothels require you to come and stay there for like 2 weeks at the minimum. And if you have small children, you're not exactly going to be able to leave them for 2 weeks at a time. Like, I have a goat farm and horses, and I can barely get away for like a week at a time. It's extremely challenging for those that have commitments outside of the industry. And so I think, if anything, the expansion of decriminalization and legal standards for how the industry is run would end up increasing stability in terms of the day to day for most women because it's not so interruptive for them to go and travel to Nevada, to a rural county, be away from their family, have to stay there 24/7. It's very rigorous. It exists in a very small, narrow box. And outside of the United States, sex work exists in a whole multitude of models that are more empowering, a little bit more supportive of a woman's day to day life, and have less than a 50-50 split, realistically speaking.
With that in mind, I would see your job as something that is really sort of like a an intimacy coordinator or a intimacy manager. What does intimacy mean to you, and how do you understand it when you go into work?
So you're spot on. And keep in mind that every single woman within my career is going to define how her work looks and feels for herself. I tend to be very intimacy focused. I'm encouraging somebody to communicate very clearly, engage in foreplay, be able to enjoy those soft moments that aren't just about get it in, get it off, try some exotic positions, and be your favorite porn star. That's like the porn star experience. And what I'm offering is more of the girlfriend experience, which is that warmth and intimacy, the communication, the enjoyment of watching a movie together and cuddling in bed or sharing a meal and getting to have a conversation about our goals and dreams for the future. That's where I find that the magic is for me within sex work. And that's not to say that any other form of sex work isn't invalid. By all means, it's all beautiful. It's whatever is the right fit for someone. But my heart for sure really lies in that soft intimacy.
Do you think, does that have anything to do, you think, with the BDSM work you did earlier? Like, do you see a through line between that work and where you are now? Anything learned, understood, etc.?
Absolutely. People think of BDSM being this very aggressive whips and chains kind of thing. But like all things, it truly exists in a spectrum. And many of the techniques that we use in BDSM really are just like bedroom foreplay, like teasing your partner with a feather. Maybe I'm not going to pull out the cuffs and shackle them down before I tease them with the feather. I might just put a little simple blindfold on them and then tease. But is that not the same sensory action? Um, a lot of things kind of have that same degree of crossover. And given that my history was already in intimacy education, very much so what I get to do with somebody is set them up for success in their future relationships, whether it be they have no idea how to perform oral on a woman, and I can give them the whole how to and send them home to their partner and give them the skills they need to please her appropriately.
So this
Or,
open, oh, sorry. I was
oh,
going to
you're
say,
good.
this opens up a very large vault of things I really would love to talk to you about. And there'll be multiple questions along this line. But I think, first of all, like, there's an enormous disconnect between porn and real life sex. And that is, I think, very problematic in terms of expectations. I think secondarily, there's a huge lack of education and information, I would say, specifically about men pleasuring women and the way in which that should be done, how it works, and the importance of it. And then lastly, I think there is this thing which I'd be very curious about, especially because I know that you cater to virgins, having someone understand the multiple dimensions of what sex is, like that it's not strictly an act, it's so many different pieces of connection, and it's pieces of pleasure, and it's a physical thing. So if you can break it down piece by piece, I would love to hear your answers to those three parts of one question.
Yeah, porn is absolutely majority performance based. These are unnatural positions with exaggerated facial expressions being done for the benefit of the camera. They are no more real than Marvel's superheroes are. It is fake. I promise they are not actually step siblings. That is not a stepmom. Those are colleagues. And in fact, there's a good chance they're all the same age too. Like it is 100% a fantasy world and it needs to be enjoyed within an appropriate context. Unfortunately, men have a tendency to dive into porn and then continue to consume more intense and more intense and more intense, where they start to open up dozens of windows and click between them and they watch like 2 minutes of this and then 3 minutes of that, all the while pleasuring themselves in an increasingly intense way. And there's just a certain reality where, like, a man's tight closed fist is going to be tighter than a woman's natural body. And that's going to lead to some performance issues down the road when somebody actually arrives at the moment of penetrating a woman. And of course, as somebody who is in the industry, who sees people who may or may not have ever had sex before, this is something that I come across all the time for so many reasons: anxiety, nervousness, porn induced erectile dysfunction. There's an anxiety that happens for that first moment of sex that oftentimes needs to be coached through and overcome. It's very normal and natural. But when you're out there, not with a professional, there's not going to be that same level of comprehension and understanding. And so a lot of what I try to do is empower the person to take control of the situation for themselves and then back away from trying to frantically get themselves up to the occasion, but rather than focus to some more of the softer moments of intimacy, foreplay, how to pleasure your partner's body from head to toe, how to identify where her erogenous zones are and how she likes to be touched, and using those moments to kind of slow down and exist within the moment rather than the anticipation of what's to come. Because the second somebody gets like highly anticipatory is when all the performance issues really begin to occur. They've already started to play out the super explicit pornographic scene in their mind's eye, and now they're not going to be able to arrive there with anything less stimulating than that. You can't be watching your mind's theater of pornography. You need to be focused on your partner in the moment and feel things deeply for yourself, not the disconnected version of it.
So how do you bring them back? Like, let's say, you're with a client and you can tell they've sort of checked out and they're wherever. What do you do?
A lot of the times it's slowing down,
Okay.
changing what is happening. Most of the time somebody gets into like a pattern of behavior, like they're just thrusting. They're just in their own little world, doing their own little thing. And be like, let's change positions. Let me climb on top. And then I'll start to go really, really slowly and intensely and intently and kind of tease a little bit and make them linger in that present moment and kind of use that almost anticipation of what's going to happen next to really recenter and ground somebody. I might even reach out and like kind of tease my hand down their face and grab their chin and like lock their eyes with mine and just be like, I want you to watch me. Like that's going to recenter somebody in a really powerful way and get them like, okay, here I am. Hello, center of attention. Yep.
Interesting. And so how did you learn how to do this? Or is there some sort of person that helps you understand how this works? Is there a toolbox of skills that you get once you start this kind of work? Or do you really just learn on the job? And if you learn on the job, how?
For me, it was a lot of reading, various books on intimacy, psychology, human connection, communication, body language, understanding the differences in people's personalities, understanding intimate trauma and how that informs somebody's sexual experiences. And that's something that you can't just like read through all of these overnight. And by no means is this required reading. This is something that the individual would have to go and seek out for themselves and start to begin consuming this. And for me, a lot of it was the applied learning on the job, trying these different things, like going slower with foreplay and seeing how somebody responded to that. And oh, this actually does work. And then finding out, wait a minute, this works for like 90% of the men. Like 90% of men, if you like force them to give you like that intense in the moment eye contact, you've got them. You have got them. They are focused in, they are locked into the experience. They have returned to where you are. Granted, there's like 10% of guys who might be autistic and might not enjoy eye contact or that kind of intentionality. So it's not for everybody. But like the vast majority of people, I can kind of read and gauge, like, oh, let me see if this can help bring them back to where we are in the present.
And so let's touch on that. What is your experience around male sexual trauma? Because I think it actually is incredibly prevalent, and I think it is not discussed unless it's like, a church-based nightmare. But I think there is a huge amount of trauma that all different permutations of men, but also very much so cis straight men go through that is um, relegated to being non-existent. And I'm curious what your on-the-job experiences of this and how you understand it.
Yeah, it's something I've read about extensively. I always lead people with I am not a psychologist, I am not a therapist, I am not licensed to treat these things. You need to be working with a professional, not just me. I can help to a certain degree, but like I'm not a therapist. You really need to work with somebody who has that as their specialty. And I can help them find somebody that covers their area, their insurance, whatever it so may be. And I'll send them to that person first, let them work through the initial few stages of things until they've arrived at the moment where they're ready to choose the more in-person experience. And I'm approaching this as a trauma-informed individual, which is going to be very consent first, individual centered and led, where this isn't about my pleasure and their pleasure in the moment. This is about something else. This is about changing a narrative, having a different sort of experience, having a successful orgasm, whatever it so may be. And that's going to look different for every single person depending on how they were traumatized. And you're 100% spot on when there's the erasure of male intimate trauma, because we want to think of men and men want to think of themselves as being immune to this kind of things. And for whatever unfortunate reason in our society, we have decided that if something violent has happened to you in the intimate sphere, that's not manly. And that somehow like is an implication upon your manhood, and it's not any more than experienced sexual violence is an implication against a woman's femininity. It isn't. It's not something you had control over. It's not something that like leaves a permanent stain on you. It's an experience that you have, and now we have the opportunity to kind of overcome and process that experience through whatever way narrative or language works best for them. And like every single person is incredibly different. I've had people where the goal is to just lay naked together in bed and cuddle and snuggle without any sort of actual sex, because there is so much pressure around cuddling and sex then being the next precursor and that turning into a fight, that cuddling was the objective. Beautiful. We can focus on that. For some people, it's the ability to say no and interrupt an intimate experience partway through and be able to pull away and step back and give themselves that power. Excellent. We are going to make sure that we are aware of these things going into the experience, which is the big difference between somebody spending time with me and somebody just going and having a hookup at the bar for the first time after a very traumatic experience, and then having a mental breakdown on this half drunk woman you just met at a bar about your ex-wife and how mean she. You don't want that experience. That doesn't help you. That just re-traumatizes you.
And do you find that when you interact specifically with these men in this space with these particular levels of vulnerability, like what have you learned over, 10 years of experience? And when you look at society at large and how it's informed this, what needs to be changed? What should be handled differently? And is there any sort of specific example you can give? So again, if someone's listening and thinks like, oh shit, I've had that experience, like there's a way to also normalize the difficulty.
Yeah. Oh gosh. When it specifically comes to like male intimacy violence, it is so much more common than anybody really wants to acknowledge. And there's this fear of acknowledgement that is incredibly prevalent. But what I have found is that if somebody is able to cross that threshold, acknowledge that something bad happened to them, and then actively make a decision that they want to do something about it, that is really the tipping point. And once somebody starts that process, I find that the majority of folks have a really wonderful and healthy outcome at the end of it, which inevitably leads to a better lifelong intimate relationship with both themselves and other people. Because once something like that happens, if you don't make the time to overcome it, it truly does become a damaging roadblock to all of your other intimate relationships. It's very, very pervasive. And it can even impact your like social sphere, your relationship with friends, how you handle situations at work, how it impacts your confidence. It really truly is something that can create a tremendous weight for people. And I guess it's really just true of intimacy concerns in general. If it's been a long time since you've had sex and you're starting to feel the weight of that lack of being without, and it's starting to affect your psyche, oh, I'm not good enough for sex. No one's ever going to want to be with me. Those are the kinds of negative things you've got to interrupt before it really causes harm to your life. And sex is a really great healer for a lot of those things. It's really nice to be able to just be vulnerable with somebody in the moment and have your body and soul appreciated for who you are in the moment.
And while you say everyone's different, have you learned anything about sexual trauma as it relates, or is it different due to gender, class, race, or do you find that there's more broad sweeping commonality? Because I think there is so much sexual trauma, and I think so much of it goes normalized, where, well, this happened and that's okay, or that happened and it's not that big a deal, or, if you don't come, that's fine, or if your partner's not invested in your experience, that's fine. Like all these things become sort of routinized. And I'm curious, do you see differences in different pieces of society? And also, what have you come to sort of understand about how to undo sexual trauma in a broader way beyond working with you, which sounds, incredibly helpful.
So I'm very hesitant to say that there's any one universal truth about intimate trauma because it is such a deeply personal and individualized experience. And it's also highly contextualized. It may be specifically about I have fears around sex after I've fallen in love with somebody. They have the fear of that long-term commitment. They'll be able to perform fine for a one night stand. They're going to be able to perform fine the first two times, but they're not having difficulties until there's actually that emotional vulnerability. And now they're having performance issues. That's going to be extremely different than somebody who, say, was bullied into sex frequently by their partner because of unequal match and desires, and somebody who felt constantly harassed and harried for sex when they didn't physically feel ready. That's going to be a very, very, very different kind of trauma compared to the other. But those are both intimate, traumatic experiences. But how you address and handle each thing is truly so individualized that there's really no way to contextualize across genders, incomes, life experiences, age, because intimate trauma that happens when somebody is extremely young, even that is going to impact somebody versus intimate trauma as a teenager or as an adult. It's going to impact different parts of their life stage development. And so I really hesitate to say anyone overarching truth or generality other than it's beneficial to confront and process it. It doesn't matter how long ago it was. If it's something where you're sitting in the moment and you're like, ah, geez, I think this might apply to me, yeah, you can do something about it. You can totally just talk to a professional. There's lots of them out there and they want to help you. They're not going to talk about the details. Like, I super anonymize anything that I ever talk about because I think that that intimate privacy is extremely important. Like, I don't go and tell experiences without somebody's explicit permission of, oh, hey, this was fun. Can I mention that? And they'll give me the thumbs up, like, yeah, absolutely. I'm very proud of what we did. Talk about it versus somebody that's gone through something a little bit more personal. That's never, ever, 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 ever going to be discussed.
Interesting. No, and I appreciate that. And of course, I'm not asking for anything that needs to be kept private, but I think again, the normalization of these discussions and of those experiences, I think seems to be very helpful to people because I think people carry around that something that happened to them either means there's something wrong with them or it's abnormal that it occurred, and that is another roadblock to any kind of recovery.
100%. You're spot on there.
You seem very positive and very happy. And I believe that's true, but I wonder, is part of it also performative? And if part of your job is to come across a certain way, because life all has ups and downs and difficulties and so forth, how do you handle that in your own personal life or in yourself? And how do you find a way to really tap into the joy when you're working?
I love what I do. So finding the joy in what I do isn't very difficult. That's extremely easy for me. The parts of my job that I find frustrating and difficult are things like navigating being banned on social media. What pictures am I allowed to use on Instagram versus Blue Sky? What words am I allowed to say or not say? Did my YouTube channel get deleted again? Like, those are the frustrating parts of my job. And it is difficult to remain positive when those sorts of things happen because they shouldn't be happening. And at the same time, I'm not going to allow those things to color or impact the person that I am. I genuinely believe that how you experience life is largely colored by your reactions. And if you try to find the good in things and the joy in things, you're generally going to live a more happy life versus always looking for the downsides and the negatives because it can be incredibly easy to focus on those things, and it's almost like a mental exercise, I think, where if you just get into the habit of being positive, like, well, my YouTube channel got deleted. That sucks. Well, at least I'm going to be able to re-upload it. I'm going to have a better understanding of search engine optimization now. I'm going to be able to reach a new audience. Maybe different videos will go viral. You got to focus on those things. Otherwise, you're just going to go crazy.
And but I appreciate that too. I think, when I started doing research on you, unfortunately, part of what I was struck by were some of the comments, and some of the way that people interface with sex workers that is very minimizing and nasty. I don't know how else to say it. And I
Oh yeah,
thought,
it's disgusting. It is like the absolute scum of the internet comes out anytime a hot girl has an opinion and is speaking in an eloquent fashion. It's too threatening. No, scary, smart woman, she devil, burn the witch.
well, and that was what was surprising to me is I naively, I guess, just didn't expect it. And so I was like, so, on top of it, you're dealing with all of that, which just again, like I only read a few and I was like, I am just not doing, I'm done. Like I don't want to read any more of this. It's awful.
Oh
And I,
yeah, I never read the comments. That is like a little personal policy I've made for myself. I'll like moderate the comments a little bit, but like I don't go through and read and process all of that. You know what? Good. People are commenting, they're reacting. That means that the social media algorithms are going to be really happy with whatever it is and pump it out to lots of other people, which inevitably benefits me.
and that's
Every
a smart point of view.
it's like I recently had an Instagram video go stupid viral. I think it picked up something like 4,000 comments, the majority of which are things like, get a real job, stop spreading your legs to make money, just variations of that. But like, what do you know? My subscribers increased, my income increased, the emails increased. Like, thank you for making me money with your hate. I appreciate you guys. Please keep it coming. I welcome it.
So I hope this is not too personal a question, but I think women are often taught that sex is about pleasing someone else in whatever type of relationship you're in. A lot of it is about giving, very little of it is about knowing yourself, like truly knowing yourself. I'm curious, does your pleasure tend to matter in your work? If it does, can we talk about that? If it doesn't, how do you get those needs met? And lastly, how did you, and I'm not saying you're done, but how did you start to figure out your own method of desire?
No, those are fantastic questions. So, whether my pleasure matters or not really is contextual to the experience and what the goals of that experience are. For example, if we're helping somebody overcome intimate trauma, we're not really worried about how I am experiencing that. That is not the focus of the moment. That's not what we're focusing on. If it's couples that are working together to improve their intimacy, my pleasure doesn't necessarily factor into that. I'm helping the two of them increase their pleasure together. If somebody is trying to learn their own body and I'm giving them a very slow, intimate massage and teasing them and helping them figure out where they experience pleasure. Again, my pleasure isn't necessarily relevant. With that said, there's just as many experiences where my genuine pleasure is important, if not one of the key aspects to a genuine girlfriend experience. If I'm miserable, I'm not going to be having a very good time. And I'll tell you right now, I'm cranky. If I'm not happy, you're going to know about it. If I'm hungry, oh, it's everybody. It's everyone's problem. Like, so there's no faking who I am. I'm not putting on like a mask or a character or anything. Like when somebody says, I want to connect with you and bring you pleasure and enjoy this relationship together, well, I'm going to be very honest about what it is that I enjoy. I like slow foreplay. I like oral, but I don't like oral after we've already started doing things. If we're going to do it, we should do that as the first thing. And like, I will be very explicit with people. These are the positions that bring me the most pleasure. Hey, let's go ahead and do this or that, or use this sex toy or this sex wedge. And there's no hesitancy with it. It's just part of the natural dialogue. If you want my pleasure to matter, well, I'm going to speak up and vocalize what that is. And our pleasure preferences are ever evolving. Like how I like to have sex 10 years ago may not be the same way I'm going to like to have sex 10 years into the future. Our bodies change, our preferences change, our desire changes. I know for myself, I really like to go nice and slow and be really intentional about it. Spontaneity is super fun, but also like, if you've been running around all day, you don't really want to jump right into bed with somebody. Like, let's go shower first. I appreciate that. Whereas maybe 10 years ago, I'd be like, yeah, let's get right into it. Oh, that'll be so hot. No, I want us to smell nice. That matters to me. We're gonna hop through the shower first. Like, I'll scrub your back, you can scrub my back, like little subtle changes. But like
And
I've really not had trouble getting my pleasure met because I have the communication skills to let somebody know what it is that I desire.
and how long did it take you to figure that out, or you didn't have any trouble ascertaining that for yourself?
It was pretty native for me. I never had a lot of like stigma or shame around female pleasure or my own personal pleasure when it comes to sex. And so that wasn't something that I really had to learn. If anything, what I needed to learn was, okay, now I'm in an intimate experience where the focus isn't on my pleasure, the focus is on somebody else. That was less of a native experience for me than the experience of having to advocate for my pleasure.
Interesting. Okay. And do you think that that's, and again, I know everyone's different, but do you feel like at least at the Chicken Ranch, your experience tends to be similar to your coworkers, or do you think your experience is wildly different from everyone else's?
And this is the most fascinating part of the job. There are certain commonalities that all of us will have, and then there's certain experiences that only specific individuals will have. I am very petite. I am 4'8". I am very tiny. You can literally pick me up, flip me around. I get some really crazy requests around my size that my colleagues that are like 5'11", you better bet they're not getting those requests. They don't get those types of emails. They get emails where people are asking to be like stepped on and squished, where it's like a giantess fantasy, like a giantess fantasy, and like nobody's asking me to be a giant. Nobody wants that from me. We get it. I'm tiny. Even amongst like a common thing like foot fetish, the guy who likes small petite feet is not the same person who likes tall girl long toes. Like these are very specific niches even within like foot fetish. So like it's really hard to say because everyone's work environment and clientele base looks so dramatically different.
Interesting. Okay. Okay. I mean, that's a very fair response. Um, how do you want your clients to see you? And then secondarily, if, because I imagine, I'm sure you do phone calls and you vet someone to a certain extent, but if something happens where you start to feel unsafe, which is, the curse for any either someone who works for themselves or someone who works on the streets, they have so little control over their own safety. Talk to me about what happens where you work.
So where I'm at, we have panic buttons. So if for any reason I'm not having a good time, things aren't going so well, I could just hit a panic button. That's it. In about 30 seconds, there's going to be somebody at the door separating me from the individual. And then we also have the right to just walk away from the experience at any point in time that we so desire. I've only ever had to walk away from an experience once with a couple. They started to pull out some really concerning substances, and I was like, you know what? No, I'm out. You know what, guys? We're gonna wrap this up. We're doing nothing, actually. Sorry, no. And that was that.
And then, and to that point, how do you want your clients to see you? Like how would you like to be perceived, or do you feel like you really just are yourself and people are going to take whatever they take away from that?
Oh yeah, 100%. I am me. I'm not trying to wear like monster stilettos and make myself look like a tall girl or anything. Like, I am a petite redhead. This is what I have to bring to the table as far as my experiences, my offerings. And either you're going to find me to be to your taste or you're not. And like, I don't have expectations for the way that somebody views me. I'm not doing something performative for the gaze of somebody else. Like, I'm not trying to be seen as like, ooh, the hottest, sexiest little redhead ever in Nevada. Like, that's not really what I'm going for. I'm just me.
And do you ever, when you're trying to figure out sort of next steps or what the future of your career looks like, what does it look like? Like, how does that work? How does one age in this profession? How does one either advance or change in this profession? And what the issues that women encounter anyways in terms of those arenas, how do you manage and think about that?
So, unlike the porn industry, which tends to have a very narrow and limited timeline, the Nevada brothel industry really doesn't have that. There is no like hard endpoint. There are ladies who work into their 50s, 60s, 70s. Like there are ladies that could work their full life if they so desire. There is somebody who finds anybody at any age attractive. It just simply comes down to how many people are into that and are interested in paying for what you're offering. And is that enough to sustain what you're looking to get out of your career? And as you age, of course, you're not always going to be, young, hot 18-year-old. Like that's not going to exist forever. And so, of course, your brand and your image needs to mature appropriately. Like, I look young for my age. I could easily pass for like 22, no problem. I routinely get carded. I'm 35, but like, I'm not trying to make myself look younger. I'm not putting myself in like little high pigtails or anything of that sort. Like, this just happens to be how I look. I wear a lot of sunscreen and I'm short. So like it throws people off when it comes to my age. That realistically is probably a benefit for me in this industry in the sense that I am mature and sophisticated, but I don't necessarily look my age. And so that I imagine is definitely an advantage.
Is this something that you could see yourself doing, for 20, 30 years to come?
Oh, easily. I love what I do. I thoroughly enjoy it. But as to your earlier question about like realistic limitations, well, there's not necessarily an age limitation. There is a limitation on being able to strike out and say, open your own brothel in Nevada, which for most independent contractors, that's kind of the eventual step. You're a hairstylist, you work in a salon, eventually you open your own salon. Hooray! As a brothel worker in Nevada, the law currently is written in a way that does not allow for any new brothels to be opened, which means you have to purchase an existing brothel. There's only like 19 or 20 brothels in total across all of Nevada. There's probably somewhere between 100 and 300 women over the course of a full year that go through the different brothels. So, like, even if every single one of those women wanted to have the opportunity, or even 1 in 10 wanted the opportunity to start their own location, it's impossible. There's not even enough locations to go around. And then you get into the financial cost. You can't just like take out a business loan for this sort of thing. You have to come to the table with the money already in hand, and you're looking at multiple millions of dollars in liquid asset at this point. And like, gosh, I wish I was that successful that I had multiple millions of dollars laying around to throw at a Nevada brothel, but I don't. So if there's an angel investor out there that wants to buy a brothel, we could talk about this. But like there are very specific limitations that are in place legally to such a reality happening where I could just go and open up my own place and keep more of my income. I'm kind of stuck within this system of 50 goes to the brand, 50% goes to me.
Interesting. And it's helpful to learn all this because some of this stuff I didn't know about. So I really do appreciate you explaining it. I
Yeah,
know.
it's very, very fascinating. Like all the legislation for the brothels was created in the 1970s and hasn't really been updated since then. In 2019, the state of Nevada was supposed to fund and even voted to fund a study of the Nevada brothel industry. But due to the 2020 pandemic, they never actually allocated the funds or started the study. And of course, it's not been a priority and has since been, well, shit canned, I guess. Like it's not going to happen. It's 2024. The brothels reopened in 2021. We're talking about legislation that was supposed to happen in 2019. They don't care. It's not a priority. It was a spur of the moment thing where one person thought that they cared a little bit about the Nevada brothel workers, but didn't actually have the gumption to follow through and be an advocate all the way.
I'm sorry.
It's frustrating. I mean, there's a lot of limitations as to what Nevada brothel workers are able to accomplish legislatively. And so we do need to rely upon our elected officials. And when they go, la, 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 can't hear you, sex work is totally fine, it's legal in text, la, 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 everything's perfect, they don't actually pay attention to the needs of their constituents and the people working within those spaces.
That makes a lot of sense. And that's, part of what I hope when people listen to this one is that they'll reconsider their stance. Because I, of course, feel very strongly it should be legalized everywhere. And I do think, part of what I understand as well is that the exclusivity makes it so you make better money. But I also think there's still a lot of money to spend. Like, I feel like it would still be a good income, even if it
Yeah,
were legitimized.
absolutely. And the whole thing, too, is that we can't have legalization until we start with the decriminalization piece first. Until that happens, there's absolutely no way to figure out what this should look like in our country. And there's plenty of other countries that have taken decriminalization as the first step that we can look at in regards to the impact. Australia, New Zealand, Switzerland, Germany all have different systems. The Netherlands has a system for sex work. And we can learn from all of these different international systems and build something that is uniquely American, something that centers and empowers the people working within the brothels primarily, and also having options outside of brothel work. How does somebody work independently? How does a small group of individuals work together in the form of like a co-op? We need to have these alternative options available if we truly want this to be a choice-based industry. Having one choice kind of leads to like a monopoly situation, which is where we are at with the Nevada brothel system. They're able to set whatever rules they want because they have the keys to the castle, as it were.
And I'm curious too. I know people are different. Everyone is their own unique being. But have you worked with only women, like not women couples, just women alone? And if so, what is that experience like? As I imagine pieces of it have to be different and there has to be some kind of through line between that.
Yeah, I see plenty of single women, women who are married but are visiting me without their husband, women who are divorced, women who are questioning their sexuality. And there's not just one reason why a woman chooses to see a sex worker. I even have seen colleagues before, like other sex workers will patronize sex workers because it's fun, it's nice, they know what they're doing. And so there's not necessarily one through line when it comes to women having experiences in the brothel space, but like there's a certain degree of softness and intimacy where there's really no circumstance in which a woman is going to hand me the laundry list objective in the same way that, say, a man tends to approach this type of industry for the first time. A guy will straight up hand you a list of all of his wishes and fantasies and desires and positions, right down to the color of lingerie he wants to see you in. Oh yeah, like some men get very hyper specific within their requests, and usually we walk that back a lot, and we arrive at lingerie is great. I can wear blue lingerie. I don't think I can procure that specific set of blue lingerie I borrowed from my friend for a photo shoot 3 years ago. That's not going to happen. Let's touch base with reality here. Blue lingerie can happen. When you're interacting with women, they would never be like, oh, I want you to wear the specific color of lingerie. That's not even on their priority list of what they're looking for experientially.
And and again, like the individuality I get, but I also, it sounds like the thing everyone is looking for at the end of the day is either healing a wound or connection. And oftentimes those things seem to be very intertwined.
Yeah, and they can be. It's really like the three pillars of intimacy. It's the connection. There has to be a genuine interest between both people. There has to be the communication, the ability to describe what it is you're looking for. And then, of course, the intimacy within whatever boundaries that you've kind of defined it to be. And those three things together really hold true of pretty much any and all intimacy experiences. Without those three things, the connection, the communication, and the intimacy, you really can't have that quality level of experience that I like to provide.
So, and your work to me, it seems very different than how most people conceptualize sex work. Like,
Oh, absolutely.
is that true, would you say, of the brothels generally speaking? Do you think that's a quality of it being legalized? Do you think there's something that's greater than that, or is that simply because this is your individual approach to the work?
I mean, I gotta take credit where credit is due. Like, this is just me. This is how I choose to experience things. There are many colleagues that have very, very different approaches. I have colleagues that do not see couples. I have colleagues that do not offer the girlfriend experience, no kissing, no cuddling. I have colleagues that offer the porn star experience. I have colleagues that offer very intense and extreme BDSM experiences. So, like, I can't really say that how I do this work is like true for all people within the brothel space because I feel like that's setting somebody up for like an incorrect opinion of somebody else. It's very much so like if the brothel is a mall, I'm just one of the stores in that mall. I don't know what anybody else is selling. I mean, we probably all have bottles of water, but like we're all going to have very, very, very different like products in that regard and what price point we sell them at, who our target audience is, what the room looks like, what we look like. It's just so incredibly different. There's really no good comparison.
Would you say that most of the people who work in this space, though, if they have had prior trauma, have worked through that trauma, or that the sex work is a way of re-triggering trauma over and over again for them?
I don't think that people really survive within this industry long term if it's something that's harmful to them. We certainly do have a turnover rate. People have a tendency to quit within their first 2 weeks, 50-50, whether somebody is going to enjoy this experience enough to truly want to stick with it, continue to work a second week. If you're not having a good time, go home. Nobody wants anybody to stay there. Like, go home, please. So, like, very quickly people will suss out for themselves, do I like this? Is sex work for me? If yes, they might try it for several tours. Are they making enough money compared to maybe what they were doing alternatively? If they're making more money doing this, maybe they stay doing this for a couple of years, or some people might turn it into a career. Some people do it to pay their way through college or pay off a car or afford a mortgage down payment, and they're only going to be doing this for so long. So, what somebody wants to get out of this industry and how much they then put into this industry is going to be wildly, wildly, wildly different. But if it's harmful to you and you're not getting something out of it and it's causing more harm than help, you're not really going to find the success enough to justify staying in there.
Well, because
No one, no one's going to pressure you to stay.
I'm sure you're familiar with the term survival sex work, right? And that's a
Oh,
very
absolutely.
different thing. And so
It
I think
is.
part of what I'm trying to parse out, especially for listeners, is there's that kind of work, which is very difficult and a lot of agency and choice is removed. And then there's the work that you do, which seems of a very different order. And would you mind maybe fleshing out the differences between those two things?
Absolutely. So to be able to work in a Nevada brothel is already somebody that's in a certain place of privilege They have a certain amount of privilege within their life. They have to have a certain amount of financial privilege going into this because it is not cheap to start this line of work. At a minimum, you're looking at about $1,000 worth of lingerie, dresses, heels, makeup, cosmetics, room decor, travel to get to and from the brothel, paying for your testing, paying for your licenses. I mean, easily four figures just to get started in this industry. So, like, there's already a pretty high minimum buy-in to be able to do this type of work. And so that puts it out of the reach of most people who are just trying to figure out where they're going to be sleeping the next day. It's a protected environment. We have to undergo a full background check. So if somebody has any other sort of like criminal history, they're not going to be able to get the work card to work in that space. And so they're more likely to be pushed into a survival space. Um, there is definitely pretty privilege that goes into this. The majority of women are very aesthetically pleasing within these spaces. I have very beautiful colleagues. Um, Body size privilege. There's not a lot of plus size individuals that are in the industry. You have mostly like thin to fit to like that kind of like slim thick where it's like, oh, you've got big boobies and a big buttock sort of thing. But like these aren't the standard body types. It definitely skews white. It definitely skews privileged. And because it does skew in those way, all of that bias together, fortunately and also unfortunately, creates a circumstance in which this is a very privileged form of sex work. This isn't something that somebody is getting into just to get through the next week. That's going to be more of your criminalized industry sex work. And with that said, even on the independent side of sex work, there's kind of a sphere of experiences. There are ladies independently making even more money, I am sure, than I am making through the Nevada brothel space. There are women who are probably working right now in Dubai who are making gobs and gobs and gobs of money. There are women who are married to politicians and literally are in the long-term sugar baby relationship who are cashing out probably millions of dollars per year. Good for them. Like, privilege can exist within the independent space too, but it's far less likely for privilege to exist in the independent space. You're more likely to find immigrants, undocumented workers, trans workers, workers of color, workers with criminal backgrounds, folks who don't have the ability or the finances to travel out to Nevada. And it's going to lead to a more at risk population. And if we decriminalized, I think that we could decrease risk for those who are most at risk. Because the reality is that within the Nevada brothel world, we're not at risk. Nobody's paying thousands of dollars to come and treat us poorly. They're going to look for the most marginalized individual. They're the ones that realistically have the violence risk. Like, we have panic buttons. I used my panic button once. I used my panic button because there was like a giant freaking tarantula and I wasn't going to deal with it. And it was between me and the door, and it was not my problem. No, that's somebody else's problem. They're going to come in and deal with this for
Well,
me. Like,
that's an unexpected turn there. Of all the things you were going to say, I never would have thought it would be a tarantula.
yeah, they had just painted my suite. It was beautiful. I had this like gorgeous, like kind of patio that opened up. And so the doors were left open so this way the paint could aerate out. And I guess the tarantula got in. So I closed the door to get ready for work. And like, I'm getting ready for work. And I just see this giant thing come out from under my bed. And I about lost it. I seriously about lost my shit. Like, I threw something at the panic button. I was standing on the bed when they finally sent the maintenance guy in there. I'm like, it's there. Get it. Like, I was so freaked out. But like, that's the only time I've ever had to use my panic button. Um, we have more false alarms where people think it's like the drink button or the towel button than it actually being a real panic emergency. People aren't coming to that space to be ill behaved. You've got to check your ID at the door. There's security guards present. There's multiple staff members present. People are on their best behavior. It's like a privileged experience to be able to have sex work in that fashion so the folks who are ill behaved are not jumping through the hoops to go to a Nevada brothel.
And I love that. And what I love is you explaining it, right? Because it shows what the alternative could be and how
Hmm.
important that alternative is.
Yes, because the privilege of safety shouldn't just be for the select lucky privileged few that managed to get into the Nevada brothel world. That safety needs to extend to every single person, regardless of what kind of environment or background or documented status they may have. We have to make it safe for everybody.
Agreed. I agree. I mean, you've made so many good points. And I think the other part of it is normalizing this choice and this experience, and also helping people really understand what's possible. Because what you're doing is really important work, and it makes people's lives different. It makes their understanding of connection and closeness and love and sex, but even more, their human connection able to be changed. And like that is really important and really powerful. So thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, I agree wholeheartedly. It's one of the greatest joys is being able to see somebody connect intimately and understand themselves in this deeper way because it really does add a richness to all the rest of their life.
Well, I so appreciate you. I would love to stay in touch. I so appreciate you. I appreciate your work, and I'm so grateful for all of your time today. Thank you
Oh, you're so, so welcome. I'm glad we were able to make this happen.
so much, so much. All right, we'll talk again, and thank you very, very much. Have a wonderful day.
Sounds good.
Thank
You
you, Alex.
too.
Okay, bye.
Bye.